You're listening to Trek FM.
Welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's 50th anniversary Star Trek Rewatch. We're going back and watching all 729 episodes of Star Trek, and today I'm joined by, from Women at Warp herself, the first-time Trekker, Andi. What's up, Andi?
Not much. I'm excited. This is actually, unfortunately, my last From There to Here, and I'm glad it's with you, because we've never gotten a chance to podcast together.
Yes, I'm excited. I've been a fan of your first-time trekking for quite a while, so it's fun to talk to you.
In person, kind of.
Yes, in person, so to speak. You know, this is your last one, but this is our first one together, so you know it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet.
Bittersweet. It's a good word for it.
So today we're talking about one episode of Deep Space Nine and one episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Playing God for Deep Space Nine, Eye of the Beholder for Next Generation. Let's jump right into it. Playing God, Deep Space Nine. In this episode, Jadzia has a Trill initiate who is training. He's in the program to get a slug, to get a worm.
A yerk.
They also have, they find a micro-universe in the wormhole, and there are Cardassian vols on the station, so there's a lot going on this week on Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
I actually really love the B-plot of the, well, maybe even C-plot of the Cardassian Bulls is kind of my favorite part of this episode, because I super love Kira and O'Brien just running around being like, rah! And hitting big, giant RUSs. It's so funny.
Yeah, when a lot of these episodes, right, we're watching a lot of Star Trek for this project From There to Here, and you look at these episode titles and they all start to blur together, and you're like, okay, Playing God, which one was this? Like, this title could be for so many episodes. It's not really episode specific, right? And it's like, oh, you start watching it, oh, okay, it's the one with the Trill initiate, and then you're like, oh, it's the one with that micro universe, and then you're like, oh, it's the one with the vols. Like, you're right, it's hard to determine what's ABC. The Vol plot probably is my favorite of the three as well.
It's just so simple. Like, there is vermin, poor Kira, poor O'Brien, especially poor O'Brien. I feel like they go out of their way to find just, like, menial tasks for him. Like, O'Brien, go take care of the Vol problem. O'Brien, fix the replicators again. O'Brien. And I'm just like, aw, that poor baby.
Yeah, he's the whipping boy of the station, unfortunately. But and then Bashir sends in that flute, which is obviously a reference to the snakes in Ireland with them being Irish and all that. That was funny. Is there a resolution to the Vol plot? Like, I'm not really sure that there is.
I'm sure that they eventually killed them all and moved on.
Oh,
but
that's so sad.
The poor Cardassian Vols.
Well, let's talk about, I guess, the A-plot for a bit. What did you think of this Trill initiate?
I thought he was rather arrogant. And certainly, I think it's a special kind of arrogance to walk into a situation and think you know more than your mentor. I also don't appreciate the way he likes to judge Jadzia's lifestyle as if it has anything to do with him and is his business at all. If Jadzia wants to hang out with a dude wearing what I can only assume looks something like space biker uniform, let her. She can drink, she can have fun, it's her life. This is a good episode that kind of showcases why I love Dax so much, and one of the reasons is that she lives life. She's a joyful character. She does what she wants to do. She doesn't apologize for it. She's having a good time. I think that that's inspiring, that after so many lives and, like, so many years, that she's still finding joy in life. And then this guy walks in and he's like, oh, not good enough. And I'm like, your face is super punchable, dude.
Yeah, he's kind of a dopey guy, and yeah, quick to judge too. And Jadzia even tells him, during the course of the episode, that before she was joined, she was very, reserved. She didn't live outside the program of the Trill, and getting the symbiote really like kind of opened her horizons to all new things. And then everybody's different. And like she says, I'm not Curzon, I'm Jadzia Dax, and I thought it was interesting where she almost referred to Jadzia like in the third person, like that was a totally different person before she was joined. You don't really think about it that way. The Trill is an interesting species that way because obviously, they're their own host, but then when you get the symbiote, that creates an entirely new entity.
Yeah, I've always found Trill episodes interesting, even when they're not the greatest, just because I think the concept is so interesting. So the concept is so strong that a lot of the weaker episodes can still be saved by the fact that I'm still interested to find out more about them and the world building around them.
Yeah, she has a line, I think, when he shows up in the morning. She says, "It always takes me longer to get ready now that I'm a woman." That was funny. But yeah, and then so the micro-universe thing, right? It's like you have this goofy Vole subplot, and then you have, the A plot being, the exploration of the Trill and how that all works between the people who don't have symbiotes yet and the people that want to get them and stuff like that. And then you have this, like, really, really hard science fiction concept of, like, this microscopic universe that they encounter, like, a subspace pocket or something. And I think independently they might have worked better, but I don't think when you mesh them all together, they complement each other that well.
No, not at all. I mean, that's the biggest problem with this episode, is just too much, and none of it really flowing together. The pocket universe thing is super boring to me. I'm not a sciencey person. I can appreciate that there are a lot of fans out there that really dig the science fiction, and that's really cool to me. But unless they've connected it to a larger theme or a character building in any way, I usually am just like, science is happening, okay. And in this case, it just doesn't grab me. I barely remember it,
Right, and I guess that's where the Playing God title comes in, because they had to decide whether to save or destroy this universe, so there's that. Although we did get the great Odo line that, "I don't step on ants," which, I totally get that from Odo. That's completely in character with him, I thought.
Yeah, that's the best part of that plot for me, is that one kind of interaction between Kira and Odo in which they have a completely understandable conflict in which you can see both sides. Those are the best conflicts, and I think it's really cool. I'm on the Odo side in that I think that life is important, even if it's not life that is easily understandable. But I also see Kira's side, and so those always make for interesting interactions, and that's one of my favorite parts of the episode is their conversation, and I just love Odo. I love him.
Oh, he's the best. Well, you have anything else to say about Playing God, Andy?
No, I think we've covered it.
We're done Playing God, and we're going to move on to Eye of the Beholder. And this episode, well, this episode is hard to summarize, I guess. Troy has a psychic impression of something that gives her a bad feeling, and hijinks ensue.
You just described, like, everything Troy-related ever. Like, you could take that description and put it on, like, 20 episodes. So, I'll help you out. This dude commits suicide, and it's fishy, and when Troy is investigating it, she gets kind of drawn into a psychic impression that makes her think that a murder has happened, and she kind of investigates it, and we find out that shenanigans happened a long time ago.
A much better summary. Thank you, Andy.
Well, I like yours, to be honest. But Troy senses shenanigans. It's basically everything Troy.
You use the terminology, psychic impression? Like, I think she says that herself several times in the episode. It was just, I found it a humorous phrase to use. I also found it humorous they kept talking about the nacelle tube. Like, the ensign who commits suicide, they're like, "Oh, he was very excited about his new assignment to the nacelle tube." I'm like, really? Who would be excited about being assigned to the nacelle tube,
Hey, there are nerds out there. We are two of them. We like things that other people might not understand why we obsessively like something. Mm-hmm. So maybe he was a nacelle tube nerd. You don't know. You don't know his life, Zach. Come on.
True. So, it turns out that this, I guess, 70% of this episode takes place in Troy's mind?
Yes.
Okay, Look, I'm not the biggest fan of this episode.
I just love that. Okay. Yes, I mean, I think that's a weak part of the episode as well, because at the end you have to start to go back and start to think, okay, when did that happen? What was real and what wasn't? And it's really hard to remember. And so you're like, oh, and it's kind of a mind trip, but not a fun one, where you're just kind of confused. But overall, I actually kind of dig this episode. I think it's pretty slow in a lot of ways, but I still like that they gave Troy kind of this mystery to solve. I like that, and it's amusing to see Worf and Troy together, even if it's in her mind. So overall, I mean, I wouldn't put it on my favorite list or anything, but I think it's a watchable episode, and I do like kind of trying to unravel things, because I'm always the kind of person who's trying to guess where things are going, and I will admit that I did not see the very end coming. I was like, wait, what? But again, not so much in a good way, more in a confused way, but still, they surprised me. That's hard to do.
Yeah, there's some discussion here had about Troy sensing people who aren't in the room. Like, she's like, oh, I felt like someone else was there. And like, oh, but you were alone. Are you saying that you sent someone when they weren't there? I was like, is that not what you do every week when you see someone on the view screen and they're like, I don't know, a light year away or something? And you're like, he's lying, Captain. You know, I mean, those are the boundaries and the limitations of Troy's empathic abilities are very vague throughout TNG. And this just is a perfect example of that, right?
Yeah, pretty much. They don't really define her powers very well, and I think part of that is just because they don't understand them very well, and because different writers use them in different ways.
Well, she even tells the murderer that when Worf and her confront him, you know, I can tell when people are lying, right? I'm like, can you really, Troy? you're just talking a big game about yourself, but I don't know. Well, let's examine the track record of that for you. But
I would like to say that dude's face is very murdery.
Oh, yeah, he's totally a creeper.
I would not have needed Troy's empathic abilities to look at that dude and be like, yeah, that dude murdered someone. But, you know, that's me. Maybe I have some latent empathic ability.
So did you like that they, this is the only time, if I'm not mistaken, that they mentioned the Warp 5 speed limit again after Force of Nature?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. There, another, okay, yeah. Well, Mr. LaForge, we've been authorized to, break the speed limit for this important mission.
I hate that episode anyway, so I just try and forget that it happened.
Well, so does Star Trek, apparently.
That episode is basically like, here are my slides, and I don't like it, anyways. So I forget about it, and now that you've reminded me, I do remember that moment where they've been given permission to exceed the warp limit, or whatever.
I give them credit to at least trying to stick with it for, like, more than one episode. They at least mentioned it once, and then they figured, you know what, forget it. I'm sure there's some, non-canon explanation of how they adjusted the warp engine field or some, technobabble BS that explains why they can go fast, but, it's like, okay, I see what you're trying to do, but it's not working.
Science happened, Zach. Science happened.
So, what's your take on Worf and Troy? Do you like them as a couple?
No, I don't think their energies match. I'm a Troiker person, I guess. It feels like, you know how later on in Friends, they were like, well, we're out of people to hook up together, so we're just going to throw Rachel and Joey together, because that makes any sense at all, and they have any chemistry. And they're like, well, wait a second, this didn't work at all, and they break them up. It feels like that.
That's the perfect analogy. I never thought of it that way. That is so good.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of really long-running shows run into that problem where they run out of romantic partners, so they're just like, meh, blender. This is another problem with the whole it was all in Troy's mind thing. Did she really, there are all these scenes where she's not there, so did she really stand there gazing into the plasma or whatever and think about Worf walking up to Riker and being super awkward about wanting to ask her out?
Was that the Worf scene with Riker and Tin Forward, was that in Troy's mind?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the problem with this episode, is trying to pinpoint the moment where Worf was like, yes, I can open it, but it will... I don't remember when that happened, because, and I just watched this episode.
They spend so much time in that room, right? I think about half the episode's in there, so it's hard to determine, when the jump was into Troy's head. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to double check, but if that is the case, that's super weird. That's a weird thing for your mind to do.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're right. Their chemistry doesn't match. It's just a weird pairing. The Rachel Joey thing is a perfect analogy. Clearly, they ran out of family members to introduce this week, so they had to introduce a random romance.
I mean, I guess I can kind of see where it's coming from, because you have Worf, who's super pragmatic and aggressive, and then you have Troy, who's romantic and, empathetic and nurturing. But that's what you have with Riker and Troy, and it just works much better there.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I'm not the biggest fan of this episode, but, fandom is in the eye of the beholder, right? So... Nice.
Nice.
Bringing it back, tying it all together. So, that being said, think we've wrapped up our conversation for today. Andi, if people want to find you on the network and the internet, where can they find you?
The easiest place to find me is on Twitter at First Time Trek, where I'm live tweeting through my first time watching of Star Trek. You can also catch me as one of the hosts of Women at Work.
As for me, you can find me on Twitter at MooreOnZach. That's MooreOnZach. And I'm also the host of my own podcast, Always Hold On to Smallville, where we talk about each and every episode of that Young Superman TV show. We're on Twitter at AlwaysSmallville with one S. All right, well, that does it for us today. Andi and I will be back tomorrow to talk about Profit and Loss and Genesis.
Genesis!